Have you ever watched a horror movie and you thought, I could survive that. I could do better? Have you ever watched a horror movie and thought, I could be in that? Not as like a victim, but as a horror movie star. Are you looking for your big break? My name is Walker, and this is the Recap episode, a podcast where I use social science to research, review, recap, and realize new things about reality TV, covering shows that are all-time favorites and shows that you've never heard of. For this episode, I'm covering the first season of 2008's Scream Queens, a reality competition show in which 10 aspiring horror actresses compete in challenges to remain in the running for a role in an upcoming Lionsgate horror movie and be the last one left to earn their place as a Scream Queen. So for Scream Queens, there were 2 total seasons. In this episode, I'm covering Season 1. You can anticipate my coverage of Season 2 in the next episode of this podcast, a week later. This show has a bit of a reputation. I don't think it's very widely known, but people within the respective communities know about it pretty well. I couldn't find much about the history of this show. Not much was out there, even though there's a lot of information out there, much more than I was anticipating finding. So I couldn't really find people, at the helm of designing and leading the show talking a lot about who came up with the idea, how did we get it together. I assume that the show was a little bit of a cash grab, as many shows end up being that have these weird premises. The horror series that this show is attached to is the Saw films, made by Lionsgate, also made by Twisted Pictures. Lionsgate is the one responsible for this series, as is another production company I'll get into in a moment. I personally love the Saw franchise. I love horror movies. Saw is my favorite horror franchise, to the extent that I know everything there is to know about the Saw franchise, and I won't shut up about it given the opportunity. So I knew of this show. I knew of Scream Queens, but I had never watched it. I'd actually saved it, watching it for this podcast or something like this, because I knew a while ago that it's I want to do something talking about reality TV. I know about the show as much as I want to watch it, so I have the full Saw mega fan encyclopedic experience. I'm going to hold it off. So I finally got to watch it. Certainly was something. So it was produced by Joke and Biagio Productions, and of course Lionsgate, the people who make the Saw movies. This production company is allegedly, according to James Gunn, the same people who made Beauty and the Geek. Although when I go look at Beauty and the Geek, I don't see them anywhere on there. So maybe it was the same actual people, just working under a different title. I was able to find a casting call from back in 2008, or maybe 2007, depending on when, how early they started searching for talent for the show. And I'll just read this for y'all. Scream Queens casting call. Are you looking for your big break? You may have found it. VH1, in association with Lionsgate, the studio behind such horror blockbusters as Saw and Hostel, is looking for confident, tenacious, uninhibited actresses who are ready for stardom and will stop at nothing to get it. They will compete in an exciting new reality show for an unprecedented prize, a breakout role as the ingenue in a Lionsgate horror film. Whether you are an experienced pro or new to Hollywood, classically trained, or a born performer, this could be your shot at greatness. If you are between the ages of 21 and 30 and have a competitive spirit and the drive to compete for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, then you may be crowned the next big Scream Queen. So it's a reality competition show. You have people coming in, they're going to compete, they're going to be eliminated once per week until we have one person per week, until we have a final winner who gets the prize at the end of being cast into, in this case, Saw 6. Saw franchise is ticking along. I think it was losing a little bit of momentum by this point, because we got into that weird part of the series where we started really focusing on the police procedural drama, which is cool, but spoiler alert, Jigsaw, the character in the films, had been dead since movie 3. They're getting ready for movie 6. I love the films, but there were some interesting, plot decisions made around this time in the franchise. So, in part, this show was probably created to drum up interest and intrigue and, some extra marketing for the upcoming Saw 6 movie. let's attach a reality show to it. Let's build up the hype. We can show this reality show for 8 weeks, and we can, tease the whole time who's going to be in the movie. Oh, here's the winner. Everyone get real excited for her to be in Saw 6, which is really, it's a neat concept. I can't immediately think of much off the top of my head other shows that have done a similar thing. There are definitely shows that are talent search competitions kind of like this, that are searching to fill a very specific role. Specifically, there's a lot of ones that are associated with musicals. How do you deal with a problem like Maria comes to mind. There's a similar one, I believe, for casting in The Phantom of the Opera. I know there's one for casting in Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's just a reality show trying to find who's going to play Joseph. This concept isn't necessarily new, but it's not commonly used. Usually your talent search competitions, think American Idol, X Factor, The Voice. They're just sort of looking for like who's the best of the undiscovered talent pool that we've selected for this season. And then, they don't necessarily earn a specific thing. They may get a contract with some kind of label or industry professional. It may just be, entirely for exposure. Our show aired starting on October 20th, 2008, ran all the way to December 8th. So a nice, last quarter of the year show. Definitely airing in October, got it to pick up that spooky month, horror season window in the year. I don't want to say back in the day, but definitely back in like the 2000s and early 2010s, Halloween was like kind of a bigger deal. And October was definitely like the month that all the horror movies came out. Nowadays, when we have a lot more of this like philosophical and like theatrical horror, like think Hereditary, think Midsommar, Longlegs, these kind of things. They're still definitely horror movies, but it's a different like brand. It's not just like slasher. It's not just like horror. I don't want to call it slop, but like all the old tropey stuff. All that stuff used to come out like only in October or just around. And so having, this in October was a really good time frame for it to release, to hit up that hype and get people excited. We have 3 judges for our show. We have Shawnee Smith, who also acts a little bit as our like pseudo host. Shawnee Smith plays Amanda Young in the first 3 Saw films. And again, minor spoilers for the franchise, but this last movie has been out for a couple years. She also reprises her role in the most recent Saw X. She's here as our host, our sort of industry expert. Her title on screen all the time is, of course, Scream Queen. Then we have acting coach John Homa, who you can go to the website, you can see a lot of the people he has coached and a lot of their endorsements. One of the biggest ones that I can remember off the top of my head is Brie Larson. He's been helping her since before the United States of Terra, and look where she is now. And then director James Gunn, well before stepping into the superhero movies, he had his most recent credits at the time of making this show are Slither. And of course, he also wrote the screenplays, I believe, for the live-action Scooby-Doo movies, masterpieces of our time. We have those 3 judges. I'll come back to this later, but this show is basically America's Next Top Model with, like, horror painted over it. If you like America's Next Top Model, if you like 2008, late 2000s, early 2010s reality TV and the personalities that come with it, you'll probably enjoy this show. If you don't like either of those things, this might not be an enjoyable experience for you, even if you're a fan of horror, of the Saw films. This one gets a little rough at times, I'm not gonna lie. So our episode format, we have a kind of, it's a reality competition, so they like to keep the format consistent for each episode, which really makes it easy not only to stay with the show, follow it, and know what's happened, but also if you pick it up in the middle, you can kind of easily jump in because you're going to get the same structure in each episode. It'll just be different cast members we focus on, different contestants, and, ultimately, whoever goes home at the end is different, obviously. So our episode format has 3 sort of challenges, I will say, or elements, I call them. We start always with an acting test, which is delivered by Shawnee Smith. where the contestants must perform usually some short scene or do something related to being an actress. And then Shawnee selects a winner who usually gets some kind of advantage for the rest of the episode. Then they go to acting class with John Homa, where he gives them a tough love acting lesson. Sometimes these are really weird and bizarre, and they're kind of questionable. But you know what? I guess his methods work, because he's a successful acting coach, and it seems to have at least made some things click for some of these aspiring actresses. And then the third element of each episode, the third component, is what we call the Director's Challenge. The contestants are given a scene. Usually they're given a scene, they're given a script they have to learn, and they have to act in a scene directed by James Gunn. He gives them notes. He expects them to adapt to the notes and do well, and this is kind of what they're judged on, primarily in their judging for each episode. Let's go over all of the challenges and like an overview of each episode, and then after that I'm going to go through all of our contestants kind of in order, talk about them, talk about their experience on the show. Kind of that's how I'm going to do the recap for this one. There's only 8 episodes, so it doesn't take too long. So episode 1, of course, that is where we meet all of our contestants. That's where the contestants meet the judges. That's where the judges meet them. That's where we meet the judges. And that's where the contestants meet a homicidal maniac. I'm going to try to deliver that the same way Shawnee does. She's from South Carolina. She has a bit of the accent, a bit of a drawl, but she's very like unenthused all throughout the show. Hard to tell if she actually is just very bored and doesn't want to do this, so she got roped into it, or if that's just the way she talks. But like, for example, when she introduces the killer that the contestants have to act at for this first acting test, she goes, "This is a homicidal maniac." It's very like, not stilted, but it's again very unenthused. Anyway, their first acting test is to plead for their life from a homicidal maniac. Everyone's a little cringe. It's kind of funny. The acting class for episode 1, they first have to like eat a fruit seductively. And we'll get into like the sexualization of women in both reality TV and horror later, but this is a big piece of that element, that piece of analysis. Eat fruit seductively. John's trying to get them to like just do it simply. They're all going like over the top. But then he twists that into like, oh, you've been poisoned. Now you have to react to like being poisoned. The lesson here is supposed to be like, you have to be sexy but also scared. And you have to be able to like flip it really quickly to be a good scream queen. And then in the Director's Challenge, they recreate sort of a scene from Slither, James Gunn's movie, in which they're like in the bath trying to be sexy and seductive for their boyfriend, and then suddenly like a snake appears and they have to react to this fake snake realistically. In episode 2, our test at the beginning with Shawnee is to make a good first impression on a casting director that she brought in. The acting class is to react to a specific scenario that John gives them while they're able to like see the face they're making on a monitor. I do think the acting classes actually had some like merit and value to the girls. You know, of course they were also used as like reality TV like tension builders and like a place to put conflict and to like show the contestants not having an easy time, because John Homa just kind of has one of those like, I don't want to say aggressive personalities, but loud and kind of gruff. And so, but like this is like this seems like a legitimate exercise. Like, let me show you what your face looks like while you're acting. So if you're doing something silly with your expressions or like your mouth or something, you can like see it and you can learn to start, adjusting for that. That seems like a legitimate exercise. And then the Director's Challenge is to make a movie poster. They do a photo shoot for this one, where they're all given a different, fake movie, and they have to pose. I think James says pose sexily. There's a lot of that in this show. Episode 3 is all about like stunts and combat. There's kind of like some themes throughout some of the weeks for these episodes. So in the acting test, they learn how to do a stunt jump, jumping out onto like an airbag, and then they have to act in a scene where they're running from a killer and jump out of a window. In acting class that week, they learn some stage combat, and then in the Director's Challenge, they must perform in a scene where they're initially a victim and then they become the powerful and aggressive final girl and fight back against a homicidal maniac. In episode 4, we talk a bit about like campy horror, which I really appreciate. We cannot ignore horror comedy when we talk about horror media. So for the acting test, they must first recreate a campy scene from like an old black and white horror film with a model of a scene partner who is like, maybe they're just this bad at acting, or maybe they're playing it up for the show. That's like the direction they were given. But the models are supposed to be like really bad scene partners, and that's what the girls have to deal with for this test. The acting class is learning how to scream properly and not like hurt yourself, which is really cool. And the director's challenge is they all must act together in a trailer for a campy movie, Reform School Zombie Squad or something, where they're all like zombie hunters. They all play like a distinct character, like an stereotype character. Sean Gunn, the actor who plays Kirk in Gilmore Girls, is in this, and this is when I learned that Sean Gunn is James Gunn's brother. And the only thing I know him for is Kirk from Gilmore Girls, so seeing him not be in character, but basically be the same exact person. And then also participate in this, kind of a wild experience. Episode 5, their acting test is to have another final girl moment where they like swear vengeance on whatever the killer is for their little movie. But they have to do it like within a pool of blood. The acting class in episode 5 is to face death. Just a standard acting class. They go to a morgue. John Homa shoves them into the cabinets in the morgue where they hold cadavers and makes them like face and really think about like, what if they were dead? Who would they never see again? Who would miss them? And tries to get them like real emotional. And then when he pulls them out, they're supposed to like recite lines and like use the emotion of facing death to do that. The director's challenge in episode 5 is to do a partner scene, but not only with a human partner from the cast, but also like hundreds of roaches. Episode 6, our acting test is to be convincingly possessed by the devil, and Shawnee's really looking for like the takeover moment when you go from like human victim to like devil possession. The acting class is supposed to be becoming an evil version of someone else in the group. It does not go this way. Instead, it turns into like the girls just sort of attacking each other for the most part, and one of them really not understanding the challenge at all. I'll just note here, James Gunn had a blog that he updated as the show was airing, which is kind of cool to see. You don't get that often. And he said that like he thinks this entire exercise was just devised by the producers at VH1 to stir up drama, because that's all it really did. Only 2 of the contestants actually like did the exercise properly and had some kind of acting breakthrough. Although for them it was more of an emotional breakthrough. Again, weird segment. The director's challenge in episode 6 is to be a seductive vampire, and they act in a scene with Michael Rooker. Episode 7, their acting test is to take a camera, run off somewhere into the mansion that they're all living in and that most of the show is being filmed in, and record the last 5 minutes of a character's life in a given scenario. Think the end of Blair Witch, when the one main female character is like filming herself really close to the camera and she's crying, because that's the example they were given. That's what they're supposed to like emulate. Acting class is to convincingly convey a conversation with a puppet. John is wanting them to like really convince him that that they believe the puppet is alive, which they all kind of struggle with. Of course they do. We have to show them struggling, and then we have to show them learning. And then the director's challenge is acting with a green screen. The contestants play both the vulnerable and evil versions of the same character, like in a mirror. It's a nice little trope that we see often, kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, or a secret personality, right? And then in our last episode, episode 8, the first part, they call it the Scream Queen's Gauntlet. It is a long, single-shot, elaborately blocked scene where they have to bring in a lot of the stuff they've learned over the past couple of weeks to get this shot. We are down to 3 people by the final episode. The gauntlet immediately eliminates 1 person, so then we are given with a top 2. Those top 2 get to go to one last acting class with John, where they get one-on-one help, and then their final challenge with James is to act in a homage scene from Saw 3, where if you've seen the movie, it's based on the scene where Lynn Denlin is talking to John Kramer about her marriage, and John confronts her, and she kind of confronts him back. 8 episodes. Not too long. Those episodes are about 45 minutes each. This obviously filled an hour time slot on VH1 back in the day. You can watch this on Amazon Prime, by the way. Both seasons are there. There are other places online where you can watch it for cheaper. I watched it on Amazon Prime because I already had it, and it happened to be there. So our contestants, I'm going to go through them kind of in, spoiler alert, elimination order. Talk about them. And when I get up to the final 2, I will not reveal yet. I'll cover the final piece and then reveal who the winner was. Makes the most sense for me to cover this rather than going episode to episode and be and this person, and this person, and this person. When you're keeping track of 10 different people at the start, that makes it kind of messy. So, our contestants, Joanne Krupa, 26, from Hertfordshire, England. She got characterized as kind of the weakest and the most lost. In the first acting challenge, she makes a lot of not good choices, and she has the weakest performance. A lot of the other contestants are giving confessional interviews about how bad it was. She froze up during acting class in episode 1, and then in the director's challenge for the Slither scene, James Gunn wasn't really getting enough from her. She wasn't able to react to the snake prop realistically. And then during judging, she shared that she gets nervous when she acts, which likely sealed her fate as the first one eliminated. Forgot to mention it earlier. The judging for this show, it's kind of campy, kind of kitschy. It just takes place in the ballroom of the mansion the contestants are staying at, and a lot of the acting tests and scenes are filmed at. They set up a little, pageant stage for them to stand on. Again, this show is just America's Next Top Model with horror painted over it, but it totally looks like it's community theater play set because there's just tree props in the background with green tulle piled at the base to look spooky, and there's a spooky nighttime backdrop behind them, and then they have this little stage plinth runway thing they stand on that has a texture on it that looks like stone. Meanwhile, the judges are just sitting in directors' chairs. Just that's it. They don't have a table, and they're just sitting in the chairs. And usually for each episode, not everyone goes to judging for the first half of the series. It's only the tops and bottoms of the week that go to judging. Anyone who's just middle of the road safe has to wait around and see what happens. Later on in the series, they start bringing everyone in, just because there's less people. They don't have to spend as much time filming that. So Joanne is our first elimination. Next is Kyla Kim, 27, from Dallas, Texas. She is characterized in her 2 episodes as nothing more than a beauty queen rather than a scream queen. She's extremely performative and stilted and kind of unreal in the first director's challenge. She gave very unrealistic decisions. She was also trying to seduce the maniac in the first acting test. We get these moments where the contestants will choose to do something and then the rest of the cast will react through confessional, which is, very, very reality TV style. During the first director's challenge, the Slither scene, she gave a very choppy and fake scream that was ah, 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 instead of just a continuous yelling, and all the other contestants are making fun of that. In her first episode judging, James Gunn remarks on her physical beauty in judging. Shawnee tries to be you're a bad actress. That's not good. You're not going to get jobs. She's and your beauty can't make up for that. And James cuts in and he goes, well, actually, it'll make up sometimes, but you won't get a lot of jobs. He tells her you won't be the scream queen. You'll be the hooker who dies in scene 2. She's in the bottom 2 in episode 1 with Joanne, but she's saved due to, quote, moments of potential. After this elimination, I'll note most of the group stated that they thought Kyla should have gone home instead of Joanne. In episode 2, during some of the in-between scenes back at the mansion, this reality component of, again, filming the girls like living together to add extra elements of drama to the show and interest between the challenges. Kyla is the one who tells us through confessional. She gives us some exposition explaining the house has gone kind of cliquey. There's the queen bitches group, herself included, and then the more homey girls, as she calls them. During the first impressions test, Kelly remarks that Kyla seems more like a model, and she's stunning, but she does not have enough personality. Kyla reacts pretty badly to this. We see a tantrum of her kind of blowing up about, like, fine, if I'm just the beautiful one, then I'll be just the beautiful one. In the episode 2 acting class, where she's supposed to react to finding out her best friend is sleeping with her boyfriend, she literally makes no change to her face in any of her, like, attempts at this. In the movie poster photo shoot, James Gunn doesn't really get a lot from her, and he states she doesn't really seem to know what she's doing. I'll note, editing-wise here, she gets the goofy fool music played during her take at doing the photos. She's supposed to play this, like, person who's had latex all over them, and they're, like, peeling off the latex kind of all, like, sexily, and being, like, kind of like a wild animal, and she's just not doing it well. She's in the bottom 2 in episode 2, and she's given the axe. And that's not a metaphor. When they eliminate someone, they have all their photos on the wall in the mansion, and the last scene of the episode is, like, an axe being put through the photo and, like, blood pouring down. There's some elements of this that are really campy that I love. Marissa Skell, who was 22 from Islip, New York at the time of filming. She didn't really stand out in the first episode in either direction, but in episode 2, she's played to be a little too intellectual during the first impressions test. In trying to, like, talk to the casting director in a simulated, like, mini audition interview, she starts talking about, like, Greek tragedy and how contemporary horror media is the closest we can get to Greek tragedy, which is a cool thesis, but, like, she gets clowned on for being too smart. Kelly, the casting director, states that she is forgettable, and she sends her for a makeover to hopefully help her out with this. She accepts the makeover, and everyone thinks it's incredible, except for one of the other contestants, Angela, who now notices Marissa looks exactly like her. However, this leads to a breakdown for Marissa later in the episode, where she starts freaking out because she has joined the show. Kind of the pressure is getting to her already, and now she's accepted this makeover and completely changed her look for a role she might not even get. She ends up in the bottom 2 in episode 2 due to overthinking and being very artificial, but she is ultimately saved. In episode 3, she makes it her goal to be as honest and open as possible, while other contestants, continue to make comments about how theatrical and fake she is. During the stage combat acting class in episode 3, she gets a little bit too much in her head. She starts overthinking again. In the director's challenge with the action scene where they become, like, the final girl, Gunn tries to give her notes, but she struggles to connect with them. She ends up in the bottom 2 in episode 3. She is axed, and Shawnee notes that, she's not seeing progress with her in the show so far. So she is gone. 4th contestant, Lena So, 25 from Las Vegas, Nevada. We don't get a lot of her in episode 1, except we learn that she has had some work acting before, and she actually has, like, a couple of movies coming out at the time of filming. The most notable one that I can remember off the top of my head is You Don't Mess with the Zohan with Adam Sandler. In episode 2, she is part of Kyla's self-proclaimed Queen Bitches group. In the first impressions test, she is notable for shaking Kelly's hand, which I didn't realize was, like, a big no. I was like, wait, why is that a bad thing? Apparently Kelly was like, listen, if we're doing casting and we're doing auditions, we're seeing, like, hundreds of people in a day. If we shook everyone's hand, we'd be dead by the end of the day. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. Lena gets very vocally upset about her rope-based costume during the movie poster photo shoot. She is just literally, like, in rope. And all this complaining, all the other contestants really get annoyed with her attitude. Her complaining actually made it from the makeup and costume people up to James Gunn, who confronted her about this during her judging in episode 2. She is ultimately told to adjust her attitude, but she's doing well at the point, so she is saved in episode 2. In the episode 3 stage combat class, there is some tension between her and Tanidra. In episode 3, between the stunt jump acting test and the stage combat class, Shawnee arranges for all the contestants to have a night on the town. This is used in reality shows to get their contestants drunk and to try to stir up drama and conflict and fighting. Because when you're drunk, you've lowered your inhibitions, you're going to be saying things, you're going to be doing things that you would not be normally doing, especially when you're keeping in mind that cameras are rolling on you. During all this escapades and out in the town, Lena makes quite a few racist and microaggressive comments towards Tanidra. So when we get to acting challenge, Tanidra's, not exactly pleased with her. And she actually ends up, hitting Tanidra a few times during the exercise, which is caught by not only the contestants, but John. In the Final Girl Director's Challenge, she actually ends up doing the best. She takes James Gunn's notes the best. She is the only one who really, take in the environment and the context of the scene and use that in her acting choices. So she actually ends up winning what they call leading lady for episode 3. That's kind of the winner of the week for the challenge. In episode 4, when they do the campy acting test, where they recreate a scene from a bad black and white horror film, what they're doing in that scene, just to briefly describe, is they have to play a head on a plate that is trying to convince another character who is, both of them are experiments of a mad scientist. The head is trying to convince this other character to join forces with her and defeat the scientist and take over. Lena really decides to make the scene her own and turns it into a musical, which was a choice. In the episode 4 acting class, she is told to be really careful about going for tears and emotion and to not let that ever take over a scene. During episode 4's director's challenge, the reform school one where they all play a different archetypical character, she's uncomfortable with a scene where her character is supposed to make out with one of the other contestants. She protests female makeouts the whole time, but she never tells James Gunn about this reservation during their quote unquote audition process, when they're telling Gunn and his associates which character they'd love to play. In contrast to another contestant, Michelle, who was also uncomfortable with this, she just told him flat out, I don't really want to do that, and they're okay with it. She didn't, so she gets cast in this role, and when they finally get to the make-out hot tub scene, she then tells James she doesn't want to do it. Luckily, a different contestant, Jessica, is perfectly comfortable doing it. She jumps in. James reprimands Lena for her unprofessionalism, which actually ends up being the thing that sends her home at the end of episode 4. Along with weird acting choices, she went a little over the top. Her character was supposed to be a rebellious Catholic schoolgirl, and she was just shouting and screaming the whole time. Even when her scene partners, Sean Gunn, was trying to deliver lines. Weird choices. Next is Sarah Agor, 23 years old, from Marlboro, New Jersey. In Sarah 1, she is really picked to be one of our narrators. She gets to describe a lot of what's going on. She's really good at the narrator job, I will say. She's the first to call Jessica, one of the characters we'll get into next, a psycho. Sarah does a really good job in the first episode challenges. She actually earns the leading lady for the first episode, doing the best in the slither scene. In episode 2, Kelly notes that she has a very unique voice in the first impressions, but Sarah isn't really featured a ton in the rest of the episode. In episode 3, she does fine at the challenges. During the night out, she gets a little too drunk and starts beefing with the others. In the episode 3 acting class, she lets her emotions take over a little bit too much. But then in the episode 3 director's challenge, she falls short of Gunn's expectations in that final girl scene. She is summoned to judgment in episode 3, but she ultimately ends up safe. In the episode 4 campy scene, she goes for a dry humor that is played off as not particularly landing with the group or with Shawnee. It may have been good, but the way the show was edited made it seem bad. Her audition for the campy Reform School trailer has no notes, but in the actual trailer, she impresses Gunn with her ability to play this kind of psycho Hannibal Lecter-esque character. In episode 5, for the blood pool final girl vengeance scene, the others note that she kind of just sounds the same as always. She doesn't really have a lot of range. In the acting challenge for that episode, she didn't really commit to the exercise and just acted the way that John thought she would after she emerged from the morgue drawer. Director's challenge, that episode with the roaches. She's kind of awkward with Jessica, who ends up outperforming her. When she's summoned to judgment in episode 5, she tries to defend her acting choices and her performance by throwing Jessica under the bus, but overall her monotonous acting is what brought the axe down on her. Next contestant is Jessica Pallett. She's 23 from Bolton, MA. Jessica, throughout the entire show, is characterized as like the crazy, psycho, weird contestant. She's also given the one that's like the main person who protests against judge or mentor advice and critiques. It's a bit of a harsh edit for her, but at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, listen, if that's what you're giving to the editors and these are the choices you're making, that's what they're going to use. It does seem in some scenes where she's doing confessionals or she's interacting with the cast or the mentors and judges and whatnot, that she might not seem fully aware of how she's coming across. In the first episode's acting test, where they have to plead for their life from the homicidal maniac, she makes a choice to try to like play another psycho, and instead of like beg for her life, she's like, I'm psycho, you want to kill me? Like, kind of doesn't get it, which is also another thing that they play her as across the season. In the first episode's director's challenge, she initially like freaks out about having to be nude in the scene, which she doesn't even have to be. She could wear nude underwear, she could wear pasties, she doesn't have to be fully nude. And she's like, I don't want to do that. And she's like protesting around the house. Sarah thinks this is where Sarah like officially starts calling her psycho, because she's like, what is going on with this woman? But then she decides to do the scene fully topless anyway, with like no coverage. So it's hard to tell sometimes if she's unaware, if she really is kind of like unstable to some degree, or just changes her mind a lot, or if she was like playing something up for the cameras. It's hard to tell. Again, the show just wants to make her look like she's crazy. She's in the bottom 3 for episode 1, but she's ultimately safe, and the judges are already sick in that first episode of her protests to their comments and critiques. They really just tell her to like shut up and listen. Episode 2, the casting director Kelly really notes that she likes Jessica's confidence to dress in her own personal style, which ends up granting her the win for that test, which earns her immunity from elimination that week. For the first couple episodes, winning the acting test granted you immunity. In later episodes, it just grants you a benefit for the director's challenge. She got a nice opportunity in the episode 2 acting class to just kind of go full crazy in the reacting exercise. Like, she was given a scene to react to where she gets to like do a crazy laugh, and it fits. So she did well. In episode 3, she's actually the only one who doesn't jump out of the window during the stunt action test. Which is bizarre, because you have this character who's like, we're playing her up to like, she'll be crazy, she'll do anything, but then suddenly she just won't jump. It's interesting choices. During the night out after that, where they try to stir up drama for the benefit of the show, she makes some very questionable and racist comments towards Sarah, invoking Sarah's Jewish heritage, that legit, like, she says it and the entire like bus of the contestants just goes quiet. A little bit of a tense scene, which is immediately then broken up by Shawnee breaking into the bus after it breaks down with like someone in a jigsaw mask. And then she delivers a very unenthused prompt about like their next director's challenge. In the episode 3 stage combat class, John states that she's a little unnatural in her movement, and he really is starting to not like that crazy is like her default state and emotion. In the episode 3 director's challenge for the final girl attack scene, Gunn really notes that her screaming is good, but she struggles to deliver the kind of like need to survive that character has as their motivation. She's summoned to judgment in episode 3, but she ends up safe. In the episode 4 campy scene for the acting test, she at first chooses not to practice the lines of the model, and I note not that doing so would have helped anyway, because these models, again, either were really, really bad actors, or they were playing up how incompetent they were for the cameras. And for the show, could be a production trick, you know. But then she makes the bizarre choice to do, quote, an accent, which is her more doing an offensive impression of someone with like a mental disability. Everyone finds it not good. Although James Gunn in his blog was like, actually, I thought that Jessica was the only one who took the scene and like really made it her own properly and connected with like the silliness of the scene. And I'm like, okay, James, whatever you say. In the episode 4 Director's Challenge, Jessica plays her role well, and of course she's the one who jumps in to replace Lena for the hot tub makeout scene where she earns some kudos for doing that. In episode 5, Tanidra, who won the Blood Pool Challenge, as I'll mention later, and her prize for that is getting to choose her scene partner for the Director's Challenge. She tells us she specifically avoids picking Jessica because she's not sure which Jessica she'll get. She explicitly states, like, we're supposed to be picking a scene partner, not partners. And with Jessica, who knows which Jessica will show up that day. Jessica does okay in both the test and the acting class in episode 5, but she outshines Sarah completely in the Director's Challenge. Notably being the only one to really go all in on interacting with the real roaches. In episode 6, we get more of her personal insight on her image, where she starts telling us she really doesn't like being characterized and pigeonholed as the wacko and crazy one, and that the judges keep doing this to her. I will note, when you start getting things like that, and you start getting these cast members reflecting on their characterization and their experience thus far, that's usually a good sign that that's someone who's going home. Most reality competition shows, for the person that's going home that episode and the person who's usually going to do the best, they're the ones who are talking the most or getting the most attention given to them. Just as a trick for if you're learning to watch reality shows critically. She does okay in the demon possession test. She completely misunderstands the exercise in the acting class for that episode, where she's supposed to become an evil version of John Homa, and instead she just becomes an angry version of herself yelling at John Homa. And then in the vampire scene for that episode with Michael Rooker, she struggles to take James' notes. She makes some weird acting choices. She's summoned for judgment in episode 6, and due to her inconsistency, but also flatlining, she's axed. We have Angela Anderson, 21 at the time of filming, from San Diego, California. Angela is characterized as kind of like the average and unnoticed contestant, which she struggles to really fight and make herself known to the judges. That's her overarching plotline. She's in the background, and it really messes with her, and ultimately, she doesn't get to do enough to show her skill. She's not really focused on in episode 1, surprise. And episode 2, Kelly says she has the best horror look, and most of the rest of episode 2 is her just kind of doing a good standard job. She's the one who really picks up on the fact that when Marissa goes and gets her makeover, she comes back looking like Angela. Which, again, really does not help for Angela trying to stand out now that she has a doppelganger. In episode 3, she does do a good job of the stunt test, but didn't really put a lot of the acting into the exercise. And she does okay in the episode 3 challenge. Episode 4, this is when we really start to get the pressure. She's feeling like being average, and she starts telling us more frequently. She's like, I'm not getting any feedback. I don't feel like I'm growing. She gets no feedback from John during the acting class where they learn screaming, which really frustrates her. And in the campy trailer for the Reform School in episode 4, James tells Angela she isn't really committing enough to her character in that trailer filming. In the episode 4 Judgment, when it's most usually for Judgment, like I said, it's the tops and bottoms, so they'll summon 4 or 5 of the contestants. In episode 4, only Lena and Angela are summoned to Judgment. The leading lady that week is just told in the summoning letter, you're the leading lady. I believe it's Michelle. During that judgment, where it's just the two of them, James tells her that she's never been to judgment before, but that may not be a good thing. She hasn't made an impression, and when she protests about not getting feedback, John Homa tells her, well, you need to ask for feedback. Which is one of those scapegoat things that they love to do on these reality shows, where one character has been characterized and edited to be kind of in the background, and then the show gets to be like, well, it's not our fault. It's you. You didn't ask for feedback. You didn't put yourself front and center. In the episode 5 Blood Pool Challenge, she commits and goes really hard. She didn't win, but this pays off because Sharni does recognize her efforts and her change to her approach. Tanidra selects her for the roach scene in episode 5 because she's very consistent, and Tanidra knows she will do the scene well, but not too well. But it turns out she's very afraid of bugs, so she does really struggle with doing this scene with the live roaches where they have to be poured all over her. She does eventually pull through with the help from James and Tanidra. In the episode 6 acting class, she's paired with Lindsay, the next contestant we'll get into. Her acting as Lindsay, like the evil version of Lindsay, produces an emotional breakthrough, and then the same when they switch the roles. During the episode 6 challenge, she makes some good, bold choices that James ends up liking. And in episode 6 Judgment, she's told to keep making these bold choices, and she is ultimately safe. In the start of episode 7, Angela is actually very upset that she was not the winner of the previous week's challenge, and this haunts her for the rest of the episode. She has a bit of a breakdown during the acting class, where John's like, what's going on? She's like, I want to know why I didn't win. And John is like, listen, the decision was already made. Move on. Do better next time. In the episode 7 Director's Challenge, where they have to play the vulnerable and evil sides of the same character, James gives her notes as she struggles to play that vulnerable character, and then in the episode 7 Judgment, her problems with lack of recognition are more of an issue, but so is her lack of commitment to her acting decisions, and she is ultimately axed. Our third place contestant, Lindsay Felton, 23, from Seattle. She's the only one with major previous acting experience. She was a child actor in a show on Nickelodeon, and this gets brought up over and over and over again throughout the show. She's not featured much in episode 1. In episode 2, during the first impressions test, Shawnee and Kelly call her frumpy. Shawnee's like, Hollywood doesn't want frumpy girls. And she's like, I'm not frumpy. Kelly sends her for a makeover along with Marissa. She accepts the makeover. It's really beneficial for her. In episode 2, she does pretty well in the acting class, and she earns a win for her performance in the poster photo shoot, being leading lady for episode 2. In episode 3, honestly, she's mostly unremarkable, but she does well. For these first couple of episodes, I'll just note this here, when we get to the Director's Challenge, sometimes they just kind of skip over them interacting with James Gunn during the challenge. Unless it's the one who's doing really poorly or the one who's doing really well. Anyone who's in the middle of the pack, they'll just show a 2 to 3 second very short clip of them doing the challenge and then move on. And they'll do that for 3 or 4 of the contestants for the first half of the show. Lindsay does the best at the campy scene test in episode 4. She wins immunity for that challenge for that win. She does well in the trailer at the end of that episode. In episode 5, one of the other contestants, Michelle, notes that Lindsay struggled a bit with the water. She does okay in the acting class and in the Paris challenge in episode 5. In episode 6, she has this emotional breakthrough with Angela during the acting class exercise about her insecurities of both being experienced but not being able to do well in the competition. Even though she's done okay so far. I mean, she's had a acting test win and a challenge win. But then she has some nervous energy during the scene with Michael Rooker. She ends up in the bottom 2 with Jessica, but of course Jessica went home. She is safe. By episode 7, this is when Tanidra is telling us regularly in confessionals that Lindsay is her biggest competition. Lindsay does win the episode 7 acting test. Her prize for that is to get to choose when she does the Director's Challenge, and she chooses to do it last, the good versus evil. She ends up doing an excellent job in that challenge, and she actually earns leading lady for episode 7. So 2 wins for her. All the top 3 make it to the final episode. Again, one of them is eliminated in the gauntlet. Unfortunately, that ends up being Lindsay. She's ultimately eliminated after the extended, elaborately blocked scene for getting a little too caught up in the technicalities of the scene and this impeding her actual acting ability. She's told she's an excellent actress, but she's not a scream queen or a final girl. Next contestant, one of our top 2, Michelle Galdenzi. She is 21 at the time of filming, from Spring, Texas. Michelle notably gets the villain edit, but she's also an extremely effective narrator all season. I will note, and James Gunn also notes this on his blog, that she's not actually that mean to the other contestants to their face. She's actually pretty kind, pretty uplifting. She has moments of true realism. She's just very good at delivering sound bites and quips in her confessionals. I don't know, I grew up in Texas, and she plays the Texas mean girl really well. But she's really fun TV. And James also notes in his blog that he has a lot of good time working with Michelle. He thinks that she kind of recognized that she could get a lot of good screen time by playing that kind of mean character, and so she did. Her other characterization throughout most of the season is relying on her beauty and sex appeal, but not in the way that Kyla did that got her eliminated. Michelle can use it and then also act. She is also kind of, throughout the season, like a roller coaster. She even calls herself a roller coaster for, like, sometimes she's really good and sometimes she's kind of middling. And that inconsistency can also sometimes result in her going a little too over the top in her decisions. In episode 1, she ends up being summoned to Judgment. She's really angry about this because she kind of thinks like Judgment means everyone goes in the bottom. They don't really know how it works yet. She immediately like reacts very angrily, which again is also good for camera time. Before she like knows if she's going home or not, she actually ends up in the top 2 with Sarah for episode 1. Of course, Sarah got the win. Michelle does really well at episode 2 and episode 3, both the acting test and acting class. This is when we start to see her tendency to get a little bit too big and ridiculous in her acting choices. In her episode 3 final girl action scene, all of her decisions are met with laughter from the other contestants who are watching. She makes some ridiculous choices with the way she acts, the way she poses her body, the way she screams. In Judgment for episode 3, James Gunn is the most disappointed with her, tells her she was the worst in the challenge by far. Bottom 2 with Marissa, but of course Marissa goes home. In the episode 4 acting test, she still goes a little too campy. She struggles with the screaming training, but that's used as like a moment for her to like learn, and then we get to see her specifically like get a little one-on-one improvement with the acting coach, which does go a long way to show that like she takes instruction and critique well. We got a sample of how comfortable she is with like nudity and playing the like sex appeal character in the bath scene for the first episode's director's challenge. But in episode 4, we got another instance of this where she like completely nails and excels at a scene where she has to like strip naked in front of Sean Gunn for the like campy trailer. She's supposed to play the like sleazy girl character for that one. Which earns her the win for episode 4, actually. She got leading lady. Episode 5, we spend the most time watching her do the morgue exercise, a good like 5 minutes. She really struggles with going in there. She's crying the whole time. This is our first like truly vulnerable moment with Michelle. And it's also when all the other contestants really start sharing that it's like they can tell when Michelle is being fake and being real, and this moment was really real. And it serves really well to kind of attack the image that she's been portrayed as so far in the show, as the villain, mean girl, relying on beauty. In this scene, you know, they got her in her glasses, they've got her in like pigtails. I don't know if she decided that or production said like, hey, you should do this for your look today. But they really like took the time here to stab at her characterization and give her the opposite. She ends up being safe in episode 5, but she's told again that she's kind of inconsistent, which is okay for film. Not for theater, but luckily this isn't theater. And when she's good, she's really good. In episode 6, she wins the devil possession acting test. She doesn't earn her immunity by that point, but it earns her her first choice of wardrobe for the director's challenge with the vampire scene with Michael Rooker. In the episode 6 evil personalities acting class, where each of them have to like be an evil version of someone else, she's paired up with Tanidra. And when she tries to become the evil Tanidra, Michelle also kind of misinterprets the point of the exercise and falls into like some stereotypes of like the strong black woman who has something to prove and uses that to characterize the evil Tanidra. They do make up and squash the beef though. Particularly, I will note that, you know, I have to award Michelle some respect because in the show, what we see in the show, it looks like she is the one afterwards to go and initiate a discussion with Tanidra about what happened. And she wanted to like fix that. She really is like, you know, very emotionally intelligent. Especially I'd say for 21 in 2008, but you're kind of at the whims of whatever the show wants to characterize you as. So it was nice to see that the show let her have these moments and have them be a part of the final product that was put on TV. She does extremely well in the vampire challenge. James and I both noted that for her like costume wardrobe choice, she's wearing these like black angel wings, which was certainly again a choice. But she earns leading lady for episode 6 for that challenge. In episode 7, she does really well in the acting test and in the acting class. She also does extremely well in the director's challenge for getting creative with her acting choices when playing the good and evil versions of the same character. And then finally in episode 8, she succeeds at the Scream Queen's Gauntlet, even though she's going a little bit too fast and was still a little over the top. But she ends up taking James's notes well and does make it to the final acting class and challenge. Our other top 2 contestant is Tanidra Howard, 28, from Inglewood, California. She is characterized throughout the entire show as being inexperienced and being a newbie to the industry. She has no prior acting experience. She may have had some brief acting classes previously, but she's coming in here with nothing. But she ends up being the winner of the very first acting test, earning immunity from elimination for that challenge. This is kind of her plotline for the rest of the show. And she's an incredible actress. She does a really good job. But until episode 7, she's either middle or she's winning acting tests and having immunity, so they're not going to focus on her for the director's challenge, or she's winning the director's challenge. Or she's acing acting class. John regularly gives her high praise during acting class. In the episode 3 acting test, she's the only one to do the full front flip turn out the window. She's the winner of that test, garnering immunity for episode 3. Episode 4, she does the camping challenge well, overcoming her scene partner, forgetting to deliver his lines. She does okay in the episode 4 acting challenge, or director's challenge. She wins the blood pool test at episode 5, granting her choice of scene partner for that episode. We get to see her helping Angela through the roaches issue in that scene, and Angela's afraid of the bugs. In episode 7, she went first to the devil possession and did a really good job, even though she didn't win. During the episode 6 vampire challenge, James really loves her performance, and we get to see here Tanidra's thought process on her acting decisions during the confessional that is overlaid over her doing the scene with Michael Rooker. I'll note here, she's the only contestant that we got that from for that part. The show is trying to characterize her as she's the one that's doing really well, even though she's inexperienced. She does hit a bit of a wall in episode 7 because she struggles to play the good and the evil sides of the same character. Her performance is a little monotonous and stagnant. This puts her in the bottom 2 with Angela. She's ultimately safe, of course, but this placement breaks her a bit as we start to see in the start of the final episode. She has a bit of a freak out and she gets really upset that she was doing middle all the competition. She didn't really get a lot of significant critique on how to improve, because she was already kind of doing really well. And then when she finally does get critique, she's well, great, now what? She's am I going to make it this far only to be gone at the end because I was never given a direction for how to improve and make sure I can continue to do well? She ends up getting over this. She struggles initially with the Final Girl Gauntlet, the Scream Queen Gauntlet. She struggles to hit her timing, but eventually James gives her just the right advice. She makes it through, and she makes it onto the top 2. So final episode, our top 2 are Michelle and Tanidra. Very formidable actresses, as we are shown throughout the show. In the rest of episode 8, these two get one final acting class with John, where he gives them some kind of one-on-one exercises and feedback. They get to go to Lionsgate, they meet the president, they meet the head producer of the Saw franchise. And then they do their final acting director's challenge, which is to act in an homage to a scene in Saw 3, as I mentioned earlier, where Lynn Dillon confronts Jigsaw after he confronts her about her marriage. While Michelle makes some good acting choices, she is ultimately still too inconsistent, and Tanidra ends up being declared the winner. James also stated in his blog later that from about episode 4, he was actually pretty sure Tanidra was gonna be the winner, and while Michelle was great and he loved working with her, he was unsure if she truly had the grit needed to do horror films and the Saw franchise. So I like to kind of do a where are they now for people who participate in these talent search shows. Tanidra, she obviously scored the role in Saw 6, and she was so good that they brought her back for Saw 3D. Michelle did a little bit of acting. Now she works in the beauty industry. Lindsay also did some acting. I believe she went on to do True Jackson. That could be someone else that I'm thinking of. Angela, it was really hard to find anything about her. She kind of disappeared. Jessica Pallett did some really minor acting, short films, but not much. Sarah got to do some actual horror acting. It's nothing remarkable. All the movies in that list on her IMDb I'd never heard of. but they were horror movies. Lena So, she got a bunch of minor and uncredited roles in a lot of well-known things. CSI, Ocean's 13, and of course You Don't Mess with the Zohan, which she said was her upcoming film at the time of filming Scream Queens. Marissa, our third out, she actually participated later in Reality Hell, Left at the Altar, and Super Geeked Up. And she also had a lot of minor roles in things I'd never heard of, but she did have some single or 2-episode roles in Dexter, General Hospital, and Criminal Minds. Kyla had very minimal acting jobs after the show, but she did participate in some music videos, and she did some hosting of minor TV web programs. For example, like Spike TV's trivia thing. And then Joanne Krupa, our very first out. Seems like the most remarkable thing she's done since this was be in 2 episodes of the 8-episode 2014 series Red Sleep. I don't know what that is. I didn't bother looking into it. General reviews of this show, like people online talking about it in the same ways that I do, really like to talk about like, wow, what was this? This is kind of a weird experience. And I share a lot of the same like opinions and sentiment towards this. What was this? This was weird. My thoughts, I'm a huge fan of horror movies and horror media in general. And again, the Saw franchise is my favorite horror franchise. And I do love a reality competition show. If you don't like reality competition shows that much, especially these talent search, if you don't like kind of artificial drama, if you don't like the personalities that were being cast in these kinds of shows circa 2008, think Jersey Shore, you're not going to enjoy this show, most likely. I mean, maybe try it and watch it. Again, Amazon Prime and other places for cheaper, but you're probably not going to enjoy watching this. If you're a reality TV bug like I am, and a bit of a like buff and history want to know her, you'll probably get some enjoyment out of it. I wasn't necessarily bored at any point. I was engaged, but it does hit a lot of the typical reality TV beats that we're familiar with. My big thing, I mentioned this at the top, and I'm going to deliver on it at the end of the episode now. This show is literally just horror movie flavored America's Next Top Model. We have a central industry experienced judge, Tyra Banks versus Shawnee Smith. We have a harsh coach, Miss J or Janice Dickinson versus John Homa. And then we have a creative type that is also responsible for the challenges and some of the judging. Noted fashion photographer Nigel Barker and director James Gunn. There's a judgment where someone is given praise for doing well, and the bottom 2 are summoned, reviewed, and then revealed who is going home. Many of the storylines for the contestants and Scream Queens are very similar to the ones that we see in America's Next Top Model. The girl who's fading into the background, the one who's resting on pretty and looks, the one who's psycho/weird, one that's inconsistent, an underdog with minimal experience, etc. There is an additional element of this for the show of the contestants living together, and this being filmed for part of the drama of the show. That wasn't really necessary, but they did it anyway. All the messages to the contestants about challenges and the next things are delivered through these elaborate and flashy means. In Next Top Model, we have the Tyra Mail with its weird cryptic poetry. And in this show, we have, like, a zombie shows up to the house, and he's puking and chasing the girls, but he's holding the scripts for them. Or there's, like, someone dressed up as, like, a haunted doll chasing him around. It is literally just America's Next Top Model, which I believe was on cycle 10 at this point. America's Next Top Model started in 23, this is 2008, and Next Top Model usually did 2 cycles per year. It's just horror movie Hollywood Next Top Model, which I'm not really complaining about. I like Next Top Model, and it was a good format to emulate. It's clearly successful. They had 24 cycles, and Tyra is still out there in the world, now selling hot ice cream. I will say, there's parts I enjoyed, I was engaged. It probably was a little bit better of an experience to watch it week to week. This does kind of happen with these reality competitions, depending on how they're made. You can get it turns into a bit of a slog after a while. At least this one's only 8 episodes. This is 2008, and we are getting in the show both what horror in 2008 was, and also what reality TV in 2008 was. Mean to women. Horror movies, at this time, we have the final girl trope, who is ultimately like a triumphant character. But for the female lead in a horror movie to become the final girl, they usually have to go through a transformation that involves a lot of like misery and abuse and torture and scary experience, which is a good plot for a character in a movie. I don't know about for like a character in real life, a person. And then, of course, reality TV in 2008 was also mean to women. If you had any insecurity and you're on a reality show and you're a woman, that show is going to be amping that up to the max and playing it up for as much as they can get out of you. If they can make you cry, they're going to make you cry. Everyone on this show cried at least like 3 times. I will say, if you're watching this show or a show like this, it's really important to remember, we only get to see what the editors and producers decide to give us. Does everyone get the same level of critique? And we only get to see that which is relevant to an episode's storyline. It's important to kind of think about who gets portrayed to be intelligent or confident, talented, skillful, respectful, etc. Jessica, again, portrayed as the crazy one, the psycho one, and it's just that's kind of just her personality. That's kind of the decisions she makes, or just how she acts. And she likes to defend herself and her choices, especially because she's getting this weird characterization, and she can recognize this while filming the show. She, at one point, apologized to John during acting class, because she's like, listen, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm trying to do the best I can, and I'm trying to actively participate. And I don't appreciate being called crazy all the time. She's like, but I want to apologize if I'm coming off as disrespectful. Maybe Jessica wasn't all that all the time, but what did the show give us? It gave us that all the time. My last little wrap-up thoughts, what does this show say about the Scream Queen archetype? Scream Queen actresses must be consistent. They must be able to sell whatever scenario they're in. And this show tells you they must also be sexy. Women are sexualized all throughout horror, especially in old school horror, and also through reality TV. But this show really kind of kicked it up a notch. There was the seductive fruit eating in the first episode, the Slither scene where they were in a bath and they were trying to seduce their boyfriend to join them. There was the sexy vampires, the swimsuits for the blood pool challenge, the campy trailer, which just not only did it have a slutty character, multiple slutty characters as they were described, but there was the gratuitous women makeout scene in the hot tub in bikinis for the trailer. There was the sexy poster photo shoot. Michelle takes a lot of screen time to be listen, I'm sexy and I know it and I love my body, and the show's hell yeah, you go girl. That's really kind of what the show is kind of saying, yeah, you gotta be a good actress, but you also gotta be really sexy. James Gunn's a little bit of a perv sometimes in the show. So is John. Just the dudes are pervs in this show. There's not a lot of them that show up, but when they show up, a lot of them are pervs. James said, interestingly, in an interview about the show, someone asked Gunn, who are Scream Queens to you? Who are you the iconic ones that, the actresses maybe should be emulating? He specifically notes Jamie Lee Curtis, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Naomi Watts. And Naomi from The Ring being specifically his favorite Scream Queen. And finally, I always ask in my podcast episodes, what does this show do for the cast members? One thing that it could do, of course, for a show like this, is expose them to potentially more work. If they're, aspiring actresses and they go on a show where they get to act a bunch, and the ultimate prize is a role in a movie, that can only be good for them, right? It got Tanija the role in Saw 6. It got Michelle, for winning episode 4, she got a role in one of James Gunn's short films, Chimpanzee, I think, something like that. But other than that, a show like this also really exposes a lot of bad or undesirable traits, which is a gamble for going on shows like these that promise connections to the industry. This is another connection to America's Next Top Model. That show promises a modeling contract at the end for whoever wins each cycle. But if you do really well, maybe other agencies will notice you throughout the show and want to sign you on. And in that show, they also spend time meeting designers and going to other agencies and meeting professionals in the industry like photographers, makeup artists, etc. But there's a kind of thing in the model world where the girls who come from America's Next Top Model, they're not real models to them. They didn't come up in the industry the same way everyone else did. They got into it by being on a reality show, by being hand-selected, potentially not even for their modeling aspiration and potential talent, but for their ability to make reality TV. And the same thing could be said here. Some of these contestants may not have been selected for their true aptitude and potential to become a really good horror actress. They may have been selected just because they would make good reality TV. And then when you're on a show like this, not only are you exposed, if you have good acting talent, yes, they can get broadcasts, such as Michelle and Lindsay and Tanidra. But also, if you are not a good person, if you make some very questionable choices while you're interacting with the mentors or judges or the other cast members, and that gets filmed and used, that's basically a permanent record of you being a bad person. And something that and being a person that people probably don't want to work with and interact with. If you're going to be difficult, if you're going to be hard to give notes to and critique to, if you're going to be racist, like, that's on the show now. That's out there forever. Lena, I believe, did receive, nasty comments and death threats as a result of how she was characterized on the show. Which, again, was not the editor's fault. She did say and do those things, which are not good. But it's easy for the show to kind of be like, well, that's all we're going to focus on for her. And maybe that should be, if you're going to act that way. Who knows? I will say, and additionally, not only for like people who are watching the show, but there's a lot of different people who go into making a reality show. And in the show specifically that's focusing on aspiring actresses, who knows what other crew members that worked on this show might show up on another project that one of these contestants might want to audition for, and that crew member can spread the word of like, wow, that working with that person was really difficult, and that influences the future work they get. Have you watched Scream Queens? Have I piqued your intrigue to go check it out? If you like, again, that 2000 era stuff, if you like Beauty and the Geek, if you like watching Jersey Shore, Big Brother, any of those, the reality competitions, you'll probably like it. It fits really well in that era. Other than that, consider checking it out and see if you come to the same conclusions I do about this show and its like purpose and what it's even for. Thank you for listening. This was another episode of the recap episode. Please share this podcast with your friends, anyone who is into reality television, or in this case, Saw adjacent things. You can follow the pod for updates and announcements and to see what I'm working on and watching next on Instagram at The Recap Episode. All the episodes are also available on YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod, and in the future, other special content will be there as well. Feel free to engage on whichever podcast platform you choose to listen on. Leave a comment, leave a rating. Next episode will be the second season of Scream Queens, so you can look forward to that. Or if it's in time in the future, you can go watch that immediately to see how I feel about that season. I've already seen some inklings that season was considerably worse. I am shivering with anticipation to see how that goes.